Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where today we're going to look at the history of Circle G, just as soon as we come back from this musical interlude.
Well, I was hanging in Graceland late one night. Elvis said, honey, could you fix me a bite? You want a peanut butter, banana too, and a glass of milk just like you used to do. Sliced it neat, laid it down with care, cut it in half like a love affair. Took it downstairs feeling proud and slick, but those bananas rolled out real quick. And mash it like the king, spread it real thick, no fancy cuts, just a creamy lick. Messy and sweet, that's the Elvis trick. Mash it like the king, and do it quick. He laughed so loud, didn't fuss or frown, bananas on his shirt slipping all around. He took my hand, said let's fix this right. Back to the kitchen in the Graceland night. No slice, no dainty flair, just mash it up with peanut care. Spread it thick, don't be shy, that's how the king made his sandwich fly. Mash it like the king, spread it real thick, no fancy cuts, just a creamy lick. Messy and sweet, that's the Elvis trick. Mash it like the king, that's the pick. So next time you're hungry, don't be shy. Mash it thick and give it a try. Peanut butter, banana swing, and remember the king. Ding-a-ling!
Hello, Terry. Hello, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. And thanks for saying it's a great song, Terry. I appreciate that. That's Marion's dancing a little bit. Well, today we're going to talk about the Circle G Ranch. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see Donna Presley's video that she put out about the state that the Circle G Ranch is in today. It's fallen apart. Over the years, a lot of different people have attempted to invest in it or turn it into something, but it just never quite gets done. And it's a lot. It reminds me of Vernon's house on Dolan Street next to Graceland. It's a project that a lot of people have attempted, and it just doesn't seem to make it to fruition. But it sure would be nice if somebody could get in there and do something about it. But I thought today we could take a look back at where it all came from. So this is an episode of Signed, Sealed, and Remembered, because we're going to see a signature of Elvis on a document during this video. But we're skipping way out of order. But we're doing that because the call went out that the Circle G needs help. And so the story begins in 1967. And 1967 was a year of change for Elvis Presley. He got married for the first time, purchased a sprawling piece of nature to soothe the soul, and by Christmas, he was anticipating the birth of his first child early in the next year. So there were a lot of changes in 1967 that happened for Elvis. On January 13th, 1967, so just a few days after his birthday, something terrible happened. So the year started out with something very bad. And Marion's asking, didn't they just collect money just a year or two ago for the ranch? I think they're collecting money for the ranch all the time. I think it's different organizations. I really don't know that much about it. I know that Donna was, and she talks about it on today's video, connected to somebody in some way about helping get it fixed at some point. I don't know if she still is. That didn't seem as clear to me through the video, but so I don't know. I just think that they don't seem to ever be able to raise enough money to be able to start the progress. So not sure what actually happens there. Hello, Anna. Thank you for coming. Definitely appreciate seeing you here. But on January 13th, 1967, Elvis received a phone call. And it was his Aunt Delta, Delta Biggs. She's the sister of Vernon. She's Minnie Mae's daughter. And of course, Minnie Mae is Grandma Dodger, who lives at Graceland with Elvis and has been with him for most of his life. And Aunt Delta is one of Elvis's favorites because when the times were tough and it looked like he might not get a Christmas that year, that what gifts he did get, weren't the greatest gifts. Uncle Pat and Aunt Delta, Uncle Pat was her husband, they'd come through every time, and they always had a special gift for him, and they always remembered him, as a specific person, as Elvis, as someone special to them, and Elvis never forgot that. And so on this day, he got a call, and it was his Aunt Delta, and she was weeping. And she was trying to tell him that she needed help. Because his Uncle Pat had passed away. Now, his Uncle Pat, he did a lot of things in his life, but he would win for a while, and then he'd be a loser again. And then he would win for a while, and then he'd be loser again. And they had traveled south to start over yet again. And Pat was going to do something big this time. And he just didn't make it. And so Aunt Delta was left there stranded all by herself. So Elvis didn't hesitate. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't stumble. He took charge. And Elvis sent Marty Lacker and another member of the Memphis Mafia on a mission to retrieve Delta and bring her back to Graceland. And that's where Delta lived for the rest of her life, even after Elvis passed away. She lived there after Minnie Mae passed away and after Vernon was gone. Delta was the last, and she lived there at Graceland. And Elvis arranged for the burial of his Uncle Pat at Forest Hill Cemetery, just down the street from Graceland. And so that's the first picture that we see today, is where Uncle Pat is buried. And this was soon after January 13th, 1967. So that is how Elvis's year started in 1967. So later in January, Elvis goes on a spending spree. And he purchases 17 horses, which he stables and boards at Graceland. And this horse buying streak started after he found a 4-year-old black quarter horse, Domino, for Priscilla. She developed a love of horses, and he bought this for her so that she could ride. And Elvis had discovered that he enjoyed riding much earlier. And if you've ever read the June Wanico book or know anything about it, you know that when he was in Biloxi, Mississippi, that there is a country club there, and he rode the horses there quite a bit. And I think that was really his first major riding experiences, but I'm sure at some point as a child, he must have ridden a few horses here or there around Tupelo. But as an adult, it seems to have started, as far as anyone can really trace out, to that time they spent in Biloxi. And then, of course, he had to ride horses in the making of Love Me Tender, his first movie. Terry's saying that it's a shame that Circle G is left to rot away. And that's true. There's a lot of Elvis places that rot away. The only one that really seems to be able to make it is Graceland. The others, they just can't hold on for very long. But Jerry Schilling found a beautiful Palomino named the Rising Sun, which Elvis bought for himself. And then he and Priscilla rode their horses together, Rising Sun and Domino. And that was at Graceland. And the cost that's listed in this reference for Rising Sun was $3,500, which in 2025 is $33,800. So this was not a cheap hobby. You had to invest into this horse riding hobby just for the horse. Now, the person who said it was $3,500 also said the horse wasn't all that expensive. Well, $33,000 seems like a lot to me. Even though that's the equivalent in 2025, that's what it would have felt like if a person other than Elvis had to shell out the money for that horse. And he had two of them. And then he bought 17, a total of 17. So this was quite an investment. That was all running around on four hooves, all around Graceland. But that wasn't where he stopped. He also bought Western gear and all the attire, the accessories that you would need to have fun playing cowboy riding these horses, which is what they're doing around the field of Graceland, the 13 acres of Graceland. And here we can see Alan Fortas. He was a friend of Elvis Presley. Hi, chillin' in Canada. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. But Alan, he used to play football, and he was pretty good at it in college. And that's really where Elvis knew him from. He was from Memphis, so he was a local Memphis football hero. And he also had a famous uncle that was a Supreme Court judge. And Alan was one of the guys, one of the Memphis Mafia. You probably best know him from the '68 Comeback Special. He's one of the guys wearing the maroon suits, and he sits on stage with Elvis when they do the band in the round, where the DJ Fontana has no drums and kind of beats on a guitar case, and Elvis takes Scotty Moore's guitar because it looks better, and he looks great with it. That's where he's wearing the black leather suit. Alan was right there. Now, Alan didn't play any instruments, and he didn't sing, and he didn't have anything to do with music. But when Elvis needed to be surrounded by friends on the stage in front of the entire world on his televised special. He chose Alan. So that tells you something about Alan, and that's the year after everything that I'm about to tell you happens. So a year later, he chooses Alan to be there in that very important moment with him. So that kind of introduces us a little bit to Alan, as you may know him from what you've probably seen if you've been an Elvis fan for very long. And from the archive now arises Alan Fortas's voice. Well, at least his words. Don't have his actual voice, but I've got his words. And I'm going to allow him, through his own words, to introduce himself to us in this story that talks about his relationship with Gladys Presley. So that's how far back Elvis and Alan go, as Alan knows Gladys Presley. And Anna's saying that, she's saying that Elvis takes the guitar from Scotty Moore because it looks better. Yes. And Scotty tells a story about it. It's a special guitar, and Elvis switched guitars on stage with him because it's a fancier, nicer guitar. And the way that Scotty interprets that is that Elvis wanted the fancier, nicer guitar in order to be photo. And that was okay with Scotty because he understood they're on television. They're trying to make an impression. But I believe it bothered Scotty because he's still telling stories about it, years later. When he could have just shrugged it off as this was all planned and it's what we were supposed to do. But no, almost everything that happened on that stage was not planned. And that was the plan, not to be planned. It was spontaneous. And Elvis was very spontaneous on the stage that day. And he just took a liking to that guitar. And he picked it up. But that's a different story. We'll have to get there on a different day. So let's hear what Alan has to say about Gladys Presley. Alan says, Gladys didn't drive. She was a very quiet type person. Her everyday life was to just sit at the table in the kitchen and watch people who came and went in the house. She was unaffected by all the glamour and glory that Elvis attained, but she enjoyed speaking to people. She enjoyed life, and she was a wonderful woman. There wasn't a day that'd go by that I wouldn't come in there, and she'd be sitting in the kitchen. She'd be dipping her snuff, and we'd sit there and talk. She'd say, "Take care of my son for me, will you? You guys are supposed to take care of him." That's all she wanted in life, was for people to take care of Elvis. So just read that last part again. There wasn't a day that'd go by that I wouldn't come in there, and she'd be sitting in the kitchen. She'd be dipping her snuff. And we'd sit there and talk. And she'd say, "Take care of my son for me, will you? You guys are supposed to take care of him." And that's all Gladys Presley wanted in life. It's for people to take care of Elvis. And Alan is one of the people that Elvis purchased a horse for. And about that day, Alan says, "The day he marched me out to look at my horse, a kind of drab, nondescript animal, I took one look at it and stopped in my tracks." Elvis said, "What's wrong with him, hog ears?" Because that's what Elvis called Alan, was hog ears. And you can see in this picture, he's got some sizable ears. "What's wrong with him, hog ears?" "Well, nothing." "What is it?" "Elvis, it looks like a mule. I want one like Rising Sun, a palomino." I'm not sure we can get you one of those, Alan. Well, then let's just forget it. I'm not sure I really want a horse, to tell you the truth. So Elvis eventually found a Palomino and bought it for Alan. And the Palomino's name was Model. And Alan told a story about Model, and he said, "But darned if my horse didn't kick his horse and raise a big knot on his leg the first day he brought him out to Graceland. The veterinarian bill must have been $5,000, which in 2025 would be $48,300. So almost $50,000 because this horse kicked Rising Sun in the leg and raised a knot." And Alan goes on. And I don't think the mark ever went away. After that, Elvis kept Rising Sun separated from the other horses in his own barn. We jokingly called it House of the Rising Sun, after the old black blues tune. So I'm sure you've heard the barn at Graceland called House of the Rising Sun, and Alan's telling us here where that name came from, that it had something to do with him and his horse. And that because Elvis was his friend, Elvis spent $50,000 because one horse kicked another horse. Plus, he bought the horse in the first place for Alan, plus the other horse. So Elvis was a pretty nice guy to his friends. And this horse buying spree where he's buying everyone a horse, this isn't just indulgence. A lot of people would point to this and say he's just wasting money. This is part of his extravagance, and this shows that he was irresponsible. But it's not that at all, because it's mythic provisioning. He's got a special horse for Priscilla, a special horse for himself, a special horse for Alan, a special horse for each one of them, so that they can all ride together and have their adventures together. They can all be equals in this adventure. And each horse is now a symbol of care, identity, and the emotional terrain of Graceland. That all of these people are a part of Graceland, which is Elvis's home. But even with all these people at his home, Elvis still needs a little bit of solitude. And the House of the Rising Sun is a poetic echo of that solitude, because he's got his special bedroom inside, and his horse has his own special bedroom, an entire barn, the House of the Rising Sun, so that they can get away and have that alone time that everybody needs. And Ann is saying that Gladys sure had a mama's heart, which I agree with. And that Palominos are so pretty, but that was kind of mean to kick Elvis's horse. Well, that's two horses for you. I've always heard they're mean-spirited animals. At least that's what John Wayne said. John Wayne, who you would think he would have loved horses because his entire career was, wrapped into horses. He did not like those animals and said that you could not trust one. But other people love them, so I have no idea. I have only been on a couple of horses in my life, and they're very large animals. And Marion's saying, wow, that's more money than he had to pay for Rising Sun. EP must have really loved Rising Sun. That's true. That's a good point I hadn't thought of. That he was spending more to care for the animals than to actually acquire them. That's a good point. And one day, around this time, well, Elvis is buying these horses, and they're all having fun riding and kind of getting into this cowboy dream. And this had been early in the year 1967. probably sometime in late January or early February. While driving along Horn Lake Road in DeSoto County near Walls, Mississippi, Priscilla noticed a beautiful 163-acre cattle ranch, and she made sure to mention it to Elvis as a lovely getaway spot that maybe he could get just for the two of them, because she was having a little bit of problems dealing with all the people that were at Graceland, because as we just got done saying, Elvis had enough friends to have 17 horses, and each one for a person. So just that alone tells you there was a lot of people at Graceland quite often. And Priscilla, she longed for a time alone with Elvis. And she'd found this spot where just the two of them could go. But why she thinks Elvis could get it isn't really clear. But she's mentioned it to him. And then Alan talks about it. And he says, one evening, Priscilla and Elvis and I were out driving in one of Elvis's convertibles. And that's when I saw the ranch for the first time. It was like something out of a movie. The grass was absolutely immaculate, like a golf course. And everything was painted and polished, like a country club. Golly, that place is beautiful, I said. I know it, Elvis replied. I ride down here all the time. Now, to me, that's a telling line that Alan's actually the one who relayed that Priscilla has mentioned it to Elvis. It was in an article that he did an interview for. But in this actual quote from him, he's indicating that Elvis said, I ride down here all the time. So when Priscilla says, hey, I saw this great place down there, Elvis knows what she's talking about. And he's probably ridden by it thinking, I'd kind of maybe like to own a place like this one day. Something like that. But he's entirely aware of this ranch and where it's at, and that it's always been there. Like he knows it. I ride down here all the time. And then Alan goes on. We kept on driving. And then I said, you know, Elvis, it has a for sale sign on it. And Elvis turned sharply. Really? He gushed, the excitement in his voice. We turned around and we went back to read the sign. So serendipity comes in, and as they've driven by, and maybe this is what caught Priscilla's attention, there's a sign that says it's for sale. And so they go back and they take a look at the sign, and they find out that the seller is an airplane salesman at Twinkletown Airport, a man named Jack Adams. And on this property, part of what is attractive about the property, other than looking like a golf course, is there's a big lake on it with a hill behind it. And on that hill is a giant stone cross, white, very large. Now that cross had been put there, I believe, by Jack Adams as a marker for approaching planes. And that makes sense because Jack Adams is tied to the airport. Right? He has an interest in aviation. He has this large property. He's put this marker on it to help approaching planes in the airport that he works at. But Elvis sees this 50-foot high concrete white cross, and he sees it as a mystic sign that he should purchase this property. So they traveled on out to the airport to find Jack Adams. And Alan Fortas says, when we got to the airport, Elvis told me to go in and ask Adams his asking price, since he was afraid Adams would jack the price up if he knew Elvis Presley was his buyer. I was just into the conversation when I turned around and saw Elvis walking in the door. Adams, who called his ranch Twinkletown Farm, was a smooth operator and a good salesman. After we talked for a little while, he turned to Elvis and he said, "Mr. Presley, let's not discuss buying and selling just now. I want you to go over there and stay as long as you want to. Take all your people, use the house, ride the horses, and treat everything just as if it was yours. And then if you like it, we'll talk about it." And that is exactly what they did. Elvis had some of his horses transferred from Graceland to Twinkletown Farm, and everyone stayed there for a couple of nights. And Ann is saying that it must have been a beautiful ranch. It sure was. And here's a picture of it. So in this picture, you can see the cottage. That's the one-room house. At least I believe that's what the one-room house is. And I think that's what Donna Presley is showing us when she shows us that pieces of the ranch are in disrepair. That's the structure that's falling apart. And we can see these wide open expanses. Now that's going to change quickly once Elvis is there. It won't be wide open like this because he brings in some stuff. But in the background, you can see the lake. Cannot see the cross in this picture. But it's a very large property at 160 something acres, right? So no way you're going to see the whole thing in a single picture, I don't believe anyway. But this is where they would gather at least initially, because it's the only place that really had a dwelling. Now there are some barns and there's some other outbuildings. Yeah, 163 acres. So this is just a very small, tiny portion that we see in this picture. So after they spend one night there, on that next morning, Elvis gets up and he says, "I've never slept so good in all my life." So he likes it. He likes being here. He's having a good time. Something about this ranch has really struck a chord with him. So he decides he does want it. But Jack Adams, he's a hard negotiator. And he wanted maximum value for the ranch, well above fair market value, at least according to Allen, who also reported that the price was $300,000, which today would be just a tad under $3 million. So 300,000, roughly $3 million today. This price included the cross, the white brick ranch, one-bedroom home, lovingly referred to as the cottage, a horse barn, several farm outbuildings, 18 head of Santa Gertrudis cattle. Now, what is a Santa Gertrudis cattle? I have no idea, but it's some specific kind of cattle, and Elvis got 18 of them. He got some equipment, and he got the 163 acres of beautiful land, including the lake, and the hill, and the cross. And Allen spoke about the negotiating process. They sat down to talk about the price, and Elvis opened negotiations by saying, "I'll take it." And Allen says, even as I was nudging him and saying, "Elvis, you don't quite do things like that." With the right negotiations, he could have gotten it a lot cheaper. But he said, "I like it. I'm happy. I want it." He even called Colonel and told him, and to appease Vernon, who loved to fancy himself as a gentleman farmer, Elvis kept the cattle, with the idea of moving most of the residents of the Graceland stables down there too, since Graceland wasn't really big enough for a horse farm. First thing he did was rename the place the Circle G Ranch, the G for Graceland. Elvis had a pilot fly him over it for an aerial view. So he keeps the cattle, and Alan's telling us that's to appease Vernon, because Vernon's not happy about the amount of money that's going out to purchase the property, apparently. And Marion's asking, how is it possible that such a small house can't be restored? Good question, Mary. Good question. It's kind of the same with the Dolan house over next to Graceland, or even the sidewalk in front of Graceland. Just defies logic and explanation. But Alan's also telling us here that Elvis named the Circle G Ranch G for Graceland. And there's a lot of controversy over that. People will say that he named it G for Gladys, or that he named it G for something else, but Alan's saying for Graceland. Now, how does he know that? Well, he's Elvis's friend, and, it's one of these things that's in his book, and we just got to really take him at his word on it. And then we would have to weigh that against whoever else has something to say about it. But Alan says it's G for Graceland. And then he's got this great detail about a pilot flying Elvis over, which probably had something to do with Jack Adams, since Jack is working at the airport. Now, if you guys would like to know Jack Adams' side of the story, you can get real close to it. If you go look on the spa guy for Circle G Ranch, he meets with, I believe it's Jack Adams' son, who has several documents about this. And they go over them in great detail in, again, I believe it's multiple videos, kind of like the old history book video. There are several different sides to the interaction, and you get to see them in the different interviews. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check the spa guy. And Chillin' in Canada is saying it's an investment property now, run by David Buddy Runnels Jr., founder of Real Estate International Incorporated, led the investor group that purchased Elvis Presley's Circle G Ranch in 2014. Right, and they had, I think that's who Donna Presley's referring to in her video that invited her out when they got the historical marker, which I think she said today is the 10-year anniversary, something like that. And but in all this time, so they've had it for 10 years now, but I believe it's in worse shape today now than ever. I mean, I don't know why that is. Couldn't tell you. I know there was money raised a few times. I have no idea how much got raised or anything like that. It's just a dream of all the Elvis fans to be able to go to Circle G and be able to tour it, but that's very rarely ever been possible. No, it's not a rental property now. It's like abandoned and they don't do anything with it. They bought it to invest. So Anna was asking if it was a rental property now. At least I don't believe it's rented. Maybe they're renting out some of the land. I mean, again, I don't really know. This is a good time for my disclaimer. I don't really know anything. I'm just a guy who finds stuff on the internet and I share it with you about Elvis. And we all go through it together and make decisions together about what it may or may not mean. And Chillin' saying, are the dwellings abandoned? It's not a working ranch. Right, I don't believe it's a working ranch. This house, for sure, is not a working, livable house. And Terry's saying, this is very interesting. Thank you so much, Terry. I really appreciate that. And if anybody else out here thinks that it's interesting, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, comment, chat, and share us with your other Elvis friends so that they too can discover hillbilly cat history and they can be here with us as we do these deep, deep dives into Elvis history. And I do believe this is a deeper dive than you're going to see anywhere else into Circle G, but I can also tell you that it's just barely scratching the surface and that I do have more to go through on it, but I kind of want to run you through a basic history and then we'll be able to come back and layer more over it at a later time. But Elvis has now negotiated in the sense that he said, I'll pay whatever. And Jack Adams has set a price, and Alan, for some reason, thought that was $300,000. Now, I believe that he was pulling that number from his memory sometime around 1990 when he was writing a book with Alon and Ash called From Memphis to Hollywood. So I don't know that he had hard proof about what that number was. I think it was a number from his memory. It's not correct. I'm going to show you what the correct number is. But it's also a great example that Alan is wonderful to get the emotional truth of what's going on here. And we're going to hear from a couple other people, and they're going to tell us emotional truth as well. But factual truth, numbers, dates, stuff like that, very rare to find them correct in memories from people 20 to 30 to 40 years later. Very rare. So I think this is just a great example of it. Alan remembers it's a lot of money, and he's saying 300,000. So let's compare that to what it actually is. And Ann is asking, which direction would Graceland be from Circle G Ranch? Which direction? So, unfortunately, I'm bad with these directions in my head as far as cardinal directions. But to get to Graceland, you basically, I think you're going to come out of the driveway that you see here, and you're going to turn to the left, and you're just going to drive straight, and then Graceland's going to be on the left. I think that's how it is. Maybe the next time that I do one of these, I'll do one of the maps that I do, and we'll actually travel there together, so we'll know for sure. But I'm fairly certain it's, if you stay on Elvis Presley Boulevard, you drive right by Circle G. But again, I'm put a big disclaimer on that, and we'll find out for sure in a later episode. And Chillin' in Canada saying it's 10 miles south of Graceland. Right. On the corner of Highway 301 and Goodman Road, Highway 302. And on February 8th, 1967, so, you know, Pat passed away January 13th. If I'm correct here. Right, January 13th, and Elvis is buying this property on February 8th. So it wasn't even a month later. And he pays a $5,000 down payment, which today is around $48,000 towards the total purchase price of $437,000, which today would be $4.1 million. So he bought this property for roughly $4.1 million. Would have been 437 at the time. Alan remembered it as 300,000. So I think that's just an interesting look at factual stuff, and like, how can we know those factual numbers? You know, but as opposed to Alan's human memory. Well, let's take a look at this. Here's the $5,000 check. So the $5,000 check came with paperwork that gives you the $430,000 price number. Unfortunately, the paperwork I don't have an image of, but whoever bought this check got that paperwork that went with it. And you can see $5,000. And there's stuff that's written on the side, and it's saying that this is earnest money towards the purchase, and that the stuff, the cattle and the stuff on the ranch come with it. It's hard to read, but that's basically what it's saying. Earnest money, they're about to make a deal, everything on the ranch comes with it. And so immediately upon delivery of the down payment and the renaming of the property, Elvis and his entourage traveled to Guy Caldwell Motors in Senatoba, Mississippi, where Elvis purchased 3 1967 GMC pickup trucks. So here we can see a picture of Elvis. This is the ranch. He's on, I'm assuming that's Rising Sun. Sure looks like Rising Sun. Definitely looks like a Palomino. He's wearing a cowboy hat. Got a kind of a thick jacket on, cowboy jacket. Looks like he's wearing for some reason the name of that clothing is escaping me. The protective pants that the cowboys wear, the leather chaps. He's got chaps on, and they look to be black with white fringe. It looks like he had a pair of blue jeans on under that. And he's standing next to a guy that's dressed somewhat similar, minus the chaps. And it's very muddy where they're at. It's a barn. It's obviously a working cattle barn because the field is so chewed up by their hooves inside the fence going up to the barn. And so it looks like he's inspecting his property as he rides around. And here we see a picture of Elvis, and I believe that's Priscilla with him, but you can only see her from the back. They're at the lake, and there's a bridge that goes across the lake. And Jack put the bridge there. And the Spa Guys videos will confirm that that's how the bridge got there. So Elvis didn't build the bridge, came with the property. This is one of the 3 pickup trucks that he bought. So they left from purchasing the property after he said from now on it's the Circle G, and they went to buy some pickup trucks so that they could get this ranch a-working. And that's what they would have looked like. It's just a slightly different view of the same truck. And this is not one of those 3 trucks he bought, I don't believe, but this is a Circle G truck. It's not from right at this moment at Circle G's life. It's obviously from slightly later, because a picture of Rising Sun has been painted onto the door, and as well as the words, "The House of the Rising Sun." It's a white pickup truck. It's 4 doors, like a car, so it's a big pickup truck. And the Circle G logo is painted on the rear doors. You can just barely see like a portion of that in this picture. But Elvis is driving. And Anna's saying, gotta have pickup trucks on a ranch, that's for sure. And so here we're back to Elvis and Alan again. Let's catch back up to them in the story. They've gone and they've bought these 3 1967 pickup trucks. And Alan talks about Vernon's reaction to the purchase of the land and the trucks. And Alan says, I thought he was going to have a stroke when Elvis turned to me and said, call the Ford dealer and have 6 trucks sent out here, and then call the Chevy dealer and order 8 more. By the time he finished, he'd bought 25 or 30 Ford Ranchero and Chevrolet El Camino trucks at a collective pop of about $100,000, which is about $1 million today, just shy of $1 million. Everybody got one, whether they wanted one or not. Elvis thought, this is a ranch. You got to have a pickup. After that, he stocked the property's small lake with expensive fish, and he threw up a 10-foot fence to keep out the curious. So he didn't just stop at those 3 pickup trucks. He bought $100,000 worth of pickup trucks. Or today, $1 million of pickup trucks. And he gave them away to everybody. And there's a lot more stories about that we're not going to cover today. But we will layer them in at some point in the future. There are a lot of people that got these trucks. So there's stories about them out there. And chilling in Canada and saying, look at that solid truck when trucks were made out of steel. Yeah, that was a good truck. All three pictures of trucks that we saw were good trucks. And then Elvis moved many employees, friends, and family onto the ranch, and he purchased 8 mobile homes to shelter them all. A lot of trucks to transport them, $100,000 worth, and many horses for them to enjoy. So he wasn't done buying horses either. Now he had room for a lot more, so he bought some. And this is where the ranch, it moves beyond being just real estate. And it becomes a mythic refuge where Elvis goes for happiness. He's decided at this point that happiness is a place as much as it's a state of mind, and that the other places that he's in are not bringing him happiness. But he finds it here on this ranch. The White Cross was a mystic sign. The aerial view was him getting a God's eye view of the entire property. And then he renamed it in his own ritual to Circle G, so that it belonged to him and he belonged to it, and that all of them belonged together. This was a ritual of belonging, and it couldn't be under the old Twinkletown name. Had to be under his new name, Circle G. His circle of grace. And this is a place where the king could be a man. He didn't have to be a king here. He could be a trickster, like the Brer Rabbit that we saw in an earlier video. He didn't have to be the lion wearing the royal robes and bearing all of the responsibility. He could just go and play for a while. And he could have fun. And he could gather with his family, not just his friends, but his family, without the glare of the public eye, all the cameras, worrying about news people, worrying about journalists. He could be there all by himself with only those surrounding him who he wanted to be there. And with the mobile homes, the trucks, the lake stocked with the fish, he's created a mythic village. This isn't just a property anymore. We saw those open fields. Many of those have now formed a circular village of these trailers, these trailer homes that all of his family and friends live in. So the circle of grace becomes a true circle. It's a temporary utopia. And these things he gives to people, these trucks, these horses, these mobile homes, they're not just gifts. They're not just to be used. They're Elvis saying, you belong. You belong here. I belong here. We all belong here together. And as part of that belonging, Elvis reached out and he continued the employment of Ralph Boucher, the man who previously managed the daily operations of the ranch for Jack Adams. So this wasn't just a piece of property that there were no consequences tied to for purchasing. There was at least one man working here. His livelihood depended on it. And Elvis continued that livelihood. Basically, he took over paying him because Jack wasn't going to pay him anymore. Didn't have any need to. Jack didn't own the ranch. And then, but, you know, Elvis didn't know Ralph. Elvis knew Ralph must be a trustworthy person because Jack trusted him. But Elvis wanted his own man there to be so that he would know that the most trustworthy man was in place, someone that he knew for sure would be looking out for him. So he chose Alan Fortas to be the ranch foreman. And Alan said, I didn't know beans about running a ranch. I knew even less about cattle, and I rode horses only when I had to. But I think the main reason Elvis asked me to manage the ranch was so I could get off the road and enjoy some time with my new wife and still be part of the entourage. It was a generous and gracious offer. Some of my friends said they knew I'd miss going out to Hollywood all the time. But in many ways, I was only too glad to be out of the Elvis mainstream. A lot of things had changed in the past couple of years, and I was one of them. The pills had altered my personality to a greater extent than I realized. So Alan is a trusted friend. He is going to run Circle G for Elvis, but he's having some personal issues, as well as being duly married. And one of his personal issues is pills. So there were pills and drugs, but not street drugs. These are pills that are coming through a doctor, and we're going to learn more about that in a minute. Well, we're actually going to learn about that in the next episode. Just look down and notice we've only got 2 minutes left. So that's actually where we're going to need to leave the story for today. Alan's the new foreman. He's going to hopefully deal with his personal problems and maybe be able to get back out on the road later with Elvis. At the same time, getting a chance to relax and live life out on the farm, out on the ranch at the Circle G, the Circle of Grace. So we will continue this episode in the near future, maybe even tomorrow. So be sure to make sure that you're subscribed so that you know when the next episode of Hillbilly Cat History airs. Should air 3 p.m. every day, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're looking for a live stream that you want to join every day, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here at Hillbilly Cat, where we go deep, deep, deep into Elvis facts, Elvis history, and we try to learn new things directly from source material. And I hope that you guys all found this one interesting. And don't leave right away, because we are going to go out on another song. But I will say to all of you, till I see you again, keep on taking care of business.
His time came too early, the curtain fell too fast. Before he was ready, before we could grasp the man behind the myth, the ache behind the fame. He wanted something simple, not fortune, not acclaim. '63, the threats came down like rain. He spoke of love, not fear, through the shadow and the strain. I wanna live to be old, he said with quiet grace, to remember her love and see our children's face. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given it his best. No mansion in the sky, no diamond parade, just the warmth of her hand and the life they made. A whisper of laughter, a child's sleepy sigh, that was the dream he carried inside. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given it